Okay, in terms of the stuff, deadlines remain unchanged. Exam 1, quizzes part 2, October 19th. Exam 2, quizzes part 3, November 16th. Exam 3, 4, quizzes part 4, December 7th, day of the Shul of Infamy. And then for the paper, draft deadline November 9th, plus 5, November 14th. Emergency deadline November 21st. Desperation deadline December 8th. And as I'm sure everybody knows, classes won't resume until Monday, assuming power and stuff. Or maybe you're not, want us to be here burning them on fire. Do a Play-Doh style, hold up little sticks and stuff. So last time we were looking at our good dead friend Immanuel Kant, talking about the stuff. We're going to more Immanuel Kant though, anything about any previous stuff, or stuff to be, that needs more.
We did his background and stuff already, or just contributions?
Yep, we got through that. And we are on the varieties of judgment.
Oh, yeah. There it is.
38.
Yep.
38.
Now, one of the many ongoing battles in philosophy is the battle over what you can know a priori, what you can know a posteriori, and that battle continues to this day. What are the limits of knowledge just by thinking about it, and when do you have to go and actually look? Now, one thing that Kant helped really get rolling is the analytic-synthetic distinction. Our good dead friend Leibniz seems to have probably started this because he claimed that there are some things that you could get by analysis. You could just take like a concept, analyze the hell out of it, and somehow get to these truths. And then, of course, the problem is we understand what analysis means in the case of analyzing like water or getting blood tests, but what does it mean when you're analyzing concepts? And Kant threw more gasoline on the fire in the following way, leading to eventually in the 20th century, this famous philosopher who's now dead, but wasn't dead then, this guy Quine. He wrote the classic paper, Two Dogmas of Empiricism, which will probably already has been forgotten. Because you really don't know if a philosopher is great until way after they're dead. So when people say, who are the greatest philosophers now, you can say who people think they are, but who are truly the greatest philosophers?
No.
Call us back in 1,000 years. So what are these judgment-y things? Well, Kant begins with the analytic judgments, and these are these. Going back to our good dead friend Leibniz, these are based on the principle of contradiction. So if you have a true analytic judgment, its contradiction would automatically be false. Now, we know what contradictions are. And again, the reason why that it's called analytic is because supposedly the predicate of this judgment is somehow contained in its subject, so you could analyze it. Now again, it makes sense when you talk about things like water, because if you have like lead contained in water, you could analyze the water to find the lead. But again, aside from the metaphor, what is it for a predicate to be contained in the subject? And people will believe it and say, yeah, I totally get that. And then everyone else says, I totally don't. I don't get that. It's a metaphor. Now, analytic judgments, they are not dependent on facts. And when you make an analytic judgment, they don't tell you something new about the world. So if you say, for example, I'll take my example of the billigon, the billion-sided figure. You can know by analysis that the billion-sided billigon has a billion sides, because it's a billion, it's the subject of billigon contains a predicate of a billion sides. But of course you don't know if one exists. And so that seems kind of harmless enough. Synthetic judgments. Now in this case, we normally think of synthetic as being what? Yeah. Yeah, manufacturing. Synthetic, fabrics, synthetic food, etc. But in this case, synthetic means this. These judgment-y claims do give us knowledge about the world. And they're called synthetic because they synthesize the subject with the predicate. And again, we know what it is to synthesize, say, polyester to make jackets and spandex and stuff. But what it is to synthesize a subject and predicate, again, metaphorical mystery. Now, if you deny a true synthetic judgment, you don't get a contradiction. Whereas in the case of the analytic ones, you do. So take, for example, triangles have three sides. If we deny that and say triangles don't have three sides, we say essentially the three-sided figure doesn't have three sides. You know, that it's three-sided and not three-sided. So, contradiction. But if we say the triangle's not blue, well, if we have a blue triangle, that happens to be true, but to deny it is not a contradiction. If you say the blue triangle, if you say the triangle's not blue, then it's not a contradiction. If you say the blue triangle's not blue, then yeah, contradiction. But if you say, hey, that the triangle's not blue, that doesn't create a contradiction. There's nothing about triangles that requires it to be blue.
But if you're talking about a specific triangle and it's blue.
Right, if you're talking about the blue triangle, then the blue triangle must be blue, unless it's named blue ironically. And it's not actually blue. Now, we know what a priori knowledge is, and that is, of course, knowledge you get just by,
Beforehand, just by thought and
Yeah.
observation.
yep, you just think it through, and you get it a priori. Now, analytic judgments are all a priori, because you don't have to go and look to see if a triangle has three sides. A posteriori knowledge, of course, comes from experience. And these are things you get, roughly put by looking. So how do we smush together these four things? The analytic, synthetic, a priori, a posteriori. So, to the smush cave, and the smush mobile. First combination, analytic, a priori. Now, these are ones that are most clearly based on the principle of non-contradiction. Examples would be all bachelors are married. How so? Well, by definition, a bachelor is unmarried. So you know if someone's a bachelor, they're not married. But of course, you don't know if someone's a bachelor unless you, unless you investigate. If someone's in a bar and saying, trying to pick up people, and someone says, hey, aren't you married? Says, no, bachelors are unmarried. That's true, analytically. But the question would be, are they married? Which is not analytic. Now, the analytic a posteriori is not a thing. Can't be. Not a thing, because the a posteriori is based in experience, and the analytic, of course, is based in analysis. So you can't have an analytic a priori, or so it's claimed. Crudely put, this would be like the analytic a posteriori would be, you know by pure reason by looking.
So it's non-existent.
Yep, so none of this.
But
So-
why?
Well, think of like triangles. You know triangles are three-sided without, you don't have to look. So something is analytic, it can't be a posteriori because you don't have to, looking doesn't,
Yeah, nothing to do with it. It is what it is.
no. Synthetic a posteriori, that is a thing. Because these would be judgments that are, based on experience, and they're synthetic because they tell us about the world. And so, also, check. So this is what we normally think of, this would normally be like a priori truths, and this would be a posteriori truths. So, what about the final possible combination, the synthetic a priori? Now, Kant claims there can be such a thing. What do these things do? Well, he claims they're a priori, so they're prior to experience by pure reason, but they're synthetic, so they give us knowledge about the world. For him, what would be an example? Well, one would be this. He claims the claim that all events have a cause. Now, he claims that cannot be, this would be known not by experience. Because no matter how much, well, unless you had infinite experience, but without experience can't prove it. But he claims you can know this about the world by pure reason. So these would be things we know about the world by pure reason, things we know about the world by experience. Now, how does he make this work? Because this itself, this is clearly, knowledge. But this seems, potentially equally confusing. How do you get a priori tells you about the world? Now, we could go back to our good dead friend Anselm and Leibniz, and they'd say, yeah, sure. There are truths that they tell you about what exists by pure reason, an ontological argument. So it's got to be a priori that tells you about the world. So how does Kant make this happen? Well, oddly enough, he takes mathematics and geometry, which most previous thinkers would stick in the analytic a priori. Because we normally think, again, going with the triangle thing, we think, triangles have three sides. That tells us, about triangles, but we don't therefore know if triangles exist. We know they exist, but that particular thing doesn't tell us. Like the polygon example. We know a priori that polygons have different sides, but we don't know if they're actually existing. So how does math do this? Well, this is what he claims. He claims we can know a priori that 7 plus 5 equals 12. But, he claims, there's no way we can analyze 5, 7, and their union to distill out 12. Now, one problem with this is, again, no one, well, except for Kant and others, seems to really have an idea what that analysis means. Because when he says, oh yes, this is synthetic a priori because we know a priori that 5 plus 7 is 12, but you can't do it by, analyzing the concepts. And then the obvious reply is, what would that even mean? What would it mean to analyze it? And Kant would say, analysis.
And how can you not do it by concepts? They're each a number representing a count. So can't you just count the two groups?
Yeah, it seems you could just do the counting. Or the analysis. Mathematics would seem to be the place where you do analysis. They would just, whatever that might mean. Yeah, and a big part of the problem is they use the metaphor of analysis, but we don't really know, well, Kant claims he knows what it means. And maybe, that he is just so much smarter than everyone else that he saw it and we don't. Or he was just kind of BSing the rest of us. Or both. Now what about geometry? Well, again, we normally think of geometry as being analytic a priori. Triangle moving three sides, the clear example. Now, he claims, though, that they're synthetic a priori. What's his example? Well, we all know the shortest distance between 2 points is what?
Straight line.
Yeah, straight line. But he claims that the concept of straight refers only to a quality of the line and does not contain a quantitative notion of shortest. So no matter how you analyze straight line, you never get shortest out of that. But again, a big problem is, as critics have pointed out for centuries, what is it to analyze a concept? What does that mean? But that's what he claims. He says you can know this truth without experiments, but it tells you something about the world. Namely, if you want to get someplace, then the way you go is the fastest. Yeah, go straight line.
Is he a firm believer in the forms? Like there's a perfect form of the line?
No, because he doesn't really get into the Platonic forms. But he would think that there could be, I think, because people who do math and stuff, they would believe there is like a perfect geometry. Because there has to be, geometry by its very nature requires that the notion of perfect, perfect planes, perfect circles, perfect squares. Because if they were like, if they had physical defects, there would be all kinds of problems. Yeah, so geometry itself in mathematics assumes the existence of perfect, whatever those things are. Now, whether or not, a person believes that they're really real is another doesn't matter, because you can do geometry and say, yeah, it's perfect, but it's perfect because it's in your mind. You just have the notion of perfect. And there,
When you blow a balloon or a bubble and let it out, it creates a perfect sphere.
it wouldn't be perfect though. If you examine it closely enough, you'd see all kinds of defects.
In a bubble.
Yep. Yeah, everything's, if you would, I mean, visually, there are things that to our eyes look, like a circle printed by a laser printer looks perfect. If you get a magnifying glass and looked at it, you'd see the ink there was imperfect, because the imperfect ink, the imperfect paper. Plato's art.
Yeah, I understand that, but in a bubble, you didn't create it, it's the air did it.
Yeah, but it's still flawless, because there'd be like little bits of dust and insect parts stuck in the bubble, all kinds of stuff going on. Supposedly. Or maybe, maybe that'd be a good poem, the one perfect bubble. You write a poem about it. Call it that. There's one perfect bubble in the world.
I wonder what I would relate that to.
It's up to you. Write a poem. I just gave it the title. I don't do poems, I just do titles of things. That's my limited skill set.
I was thinking about it. One perfect bubble.
Yeah, some people are title creators, some people are poets. Now, what Kant wants to do, you may wonder, like, why is he doing all this, jamming together of things? Well, he thinks that you can have synthetic a priori judgments in mathematics, physics, metaphysics, and perhaps strangely enough, morality. Because he wants to get things that are by pure reason, but also tell us about the world. And that's kind of one of his many major contributions. And it's a major contribution because people still fight about it centuries later. Like, for example, the Kavanaugh fight, people will forget about that shortly enough. And move on to other fights. But the battle over analytic synthetic persists.
Who won that fight there?
Who won that fight? I think nobody won. I think everyone lost that one. Although Kavanaugh's on the Supreme Court, so I guess that was technically a win. But now, like, everybody hates everybody. So it's, at least my friends on Facebook are hating, lots of friendships broken over that, which is sad. Sad. I mean, people should fight for what they believe in, but they probably shouldn't butcher their friends on Facebook over that. Which is why I actually don't talk politics on Facebook, because I leave it all for like places where
That's dangerous.
and you don't convince anybody. No one ever
No, you don't.
convince anybody. Because logic is largely useless for convincing
Oh, yeah,
people.
exactly.
So I just post memes about cats. Oh no, on my blog I do all my arguments. Because none of my friends go to my blog because I warn them about that. So Kant's going to try to make this stuff happen. So what's his toolkit for doing this seemingly impossible? Well, it has an appropriately cool name, which also could be a good name for the independent band. Probably more of like a 70s, but maybe not, maybe like a retro band, called the Transcendent Method. So here's how he does the transcendent stuff. Now, what Kant's trying to do is essentially, in a way, be bipartisan. To use a metaphor of today's situation, the Democrats, making some good points, but also doing, creating a lot of trouble. The Republicans making some good points, but also creating a lot of disaster. And you'd be like a third-party person coming along saying, yeah, the Democrats got some good ideas, Republicans have good ideas, but there's all this other terrible crap. So why can't we have like a third-party solution that fixes all of these problems? So Kant, in a way, is kind of the third-party philosopher. He says, the empiricists have some good stuff, but they do all this crazy stuff. The rationalists have some good stuff, but they do all this crazy stuff. Why don't we, instead of fighting, why don't we, get together and have something that takes the best of both?
Am I in your class? This is the wrong.
Oh, is that the wrong roll? Did I grab the wrong one?
You got a lot of marks on there.
I do have a lot of classes.
Kadeem,
What class is that?
Kadeem is in there, but I know I'm not on there.
Oh, this is my night class, sorry. I have so many folders. Also, I have people with similar. That's the thing, 'cause I think I'm marked every class.
Really?
Probably seems like it. It was only that class, right? So, why does he reject empiricism? Well, one thing empiricists tried to do was use generalizations, which is perfectly reasonable. You go from specific facts to generalized. Aristotle did that. Everyone does that. Now, Hume, who sort of got Kant rolling, he's kind of a response to Hume. Hume claimed, no matter, and we'll see this, well actually, if you take the epistemology class, you'll see this in great detail. Hume claimed that because of the limits of empiricism, all your generalizations will be inconclusive. It's a problem of induction. It's in a specific case that no matter how well you reason, you can always be wrong. So Kant said, yeah, Hume got this right. If you just use empiricism, generalizing from empirical experiences, or generalizing from empirical experiences to try to get to universal necessary truths, you never will. So if you're stuck with methods of empiricists, you would say, correctly within your worldview, this can never be proven. I mean, again, going to a political analogy, if you hold to like the ideology of Democrats or Republicans, you would draw conclusions about what's possible and what's impossible. If you're a Democrat, you'd say trickle down can never work. And if you're a Republican, you would say, well, free college could never work. Because within the ideology, those things seem, impossible. And so in the ideology of empiricism, that would be impossible. But Kant says they got to be wrong, because we got to have this. We can have this knowledge, so empiricists have to be wrong. So he brings forth the transcendent method, and here's how it works out. Now, what Kant does is this. He says, here's how you do it. You take experience in general, and you try to figure out, if I'm having this experience, what would be the things that would have to be for this experience to be possible? So what he calls these features of experience, the transcendental structures of experience. And these are features that aren't locked into any particular experience, but any experience of that type has to have those features. So basically his test is this. Take an experience, any experience at all, like a magic trick. Pick a card, pick any card. So pick an experience, any experience. And ask yourself, could I have this experience? Could I imagine this same experience without a certain structural feature? And if the answer is yes, then you would say it's not necessary to that experience, I don't have to have it. But if you say this experience could not occur without that feature, then it's necessary. But by definition, it'd be, if I have this experience, then I must have this feature. Because if I do not have this feature, I cannot have this experience. Standard necessary condition. What would be an example of this? Well, suppose we have, think of like an experience that has spatial components. Wide range of experience, like what we're doing now. Like you experience the room like you're this far away from, the board, you're, so many meters away from the door, you're so many feet away from the ceiling, you're so many kilometers from, Sawchoppy, you're so many miles from Pluto. And in order to have, no matter, all the individual experiences are kind of different. Like your spatial experience, say, in a movie theater, it'll be slightly different. But of course, if you have a spatial experience, it's got to have space. Because if you took away space, you couldn't have these spatial experiences. So you've got to have space. Another example, causal experiences. We have experience of that where things seem to cause other things. Like you put your popcorn or your corn before it's popped into the microwave, and then it gets popped. And then you have other things like where you turn the key in your car and it starts. So you have all these causal experiences, and you can't have them without causation. And same for time. And so the idea would be, if you have an experience, general type of experience, if you can't have that experience without X, then you've got a reason to accept X. So if you can't have experiences, spatial experiences without space, gotta accept space. Can't have temporal experiences without time, gotta have time. If you can't have Netflix experience without Netflix, you gotta have Netflix.
Question, why do you think you put your grease on the stove, you got your grease hot, and then you put your popcorn in the grease, but then you never pop at the same time?
You make popcorn?
Popcorn in the grease.
Popcorn.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's how you had to make it.
Oh,
That's how, that before Michael, back in the day, before
They
time,
don't know that.
you cook your popcorn in oil.
That's the way it's
Yeah,
done.
you put it on the stove.
You always know that for real.
No, I knew that they had like the tins or.
Yeah. Oh, the Jiffy Pop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that, I knew they had that, but I didn't know you know other like that.
Oh, yeah, because you buy
But they
popcorn.
sell it still in the oil that you put in there.
Yeah, old pop. Yeah, if you're fancy, you had a popcorn maker. I remember they had it was basically like a hot plate, except it had a top on it. And you put in oil, and then you put in your kernels, and then you let it go. Then later they had the fancy air poppers that would use hot air. You do basically it's an air fryer without
Yeah.
oil. Yeah, the reason why they pop at different times is because different amounts of differences in size, differences in the moisture content, as well as the oil is not uniformly hot. You'll have, because your stove elements are not uniformly hot, there'll be areas that are hotter. If you have like a stove that's getting old, or if you put a frying pan in a stove that's electric or even gas, you'll notice there'll be zones that are much hotter. So that's a secret of hot.
It's probably better for you using it, getting it off the stove in the microwave.
No, well,
Possibly be good for you.
the radiation's fine. It's fine. It's most of the chemicals in it that they put in there, because there's a person who, they claim that because they would get their bag of popcorn, they would they immediately inhale the fumes and stuff. And they gave them supposedly they claim they gave them cancer.
What?
Yeah. Well, what? Actually, if you inhale any burnings, the particles, you'll probably get something, which is why
I heard something about that, the more that you eat burned foods, the higher your chances of getting cancer is.
They claim that. But my parents used to tell me that they said that burnt toast would keep you from getting worms. And I asked my science teacher, and she said no. I remember going home and she said that doesn't work. And I'm like, we just didn't want you to waste the toast. The lies people tell us.
So they're talking about burnt food, but not food that's well cooked.
Oh, well cooked helps you avoid, it might increase your chance of getting cancer, but it kills off most of the pathogens. So the pathogens will kill you sooner than the cancer. So well cooked is probably good. And eventually everything kills you. That's just the rule. Eventually they'll add up and you'll be dead. As they said, no one gets out of life alive.
Wow.
Which is the transcendent method. You can't imagine any experience that doesn't end eventually.
That's literally universal.
Yep. So Kant uses this to get us to space and time. Now, scientific knowledge, of course, we consider empirical science, deals obviously with objects hanging out in space and time. And to understand how we know about the world, we've got to understand how we experience objects spatially and temporally. Now, Kant claims this. We don't actually have objects out there that are space and time that we experience. How so? He claims, though, they're not objects out there, so there's not like space and time out there. He claims they're frames of references that, in terms of which stuff appears to us. We don't experience space. We experience objects spatially. We don't experience time. We experience objects temporally, which is a fine distinction, but an important one. Because Newton and other thinkers believed that space was like a big box where we keep our stuff. There is actual space. And then there's also viewed like time is also like a dimension. Like a lot of sci-fi, time travel sci-fi makes time to be like a place. You know, they think of it very spatial, like you travel through space, you travel through time. Totally real, according to Connor. According to other people, it's an illusion. Lunchtime, doubly so. Yeah, so he thinks that the idea of like, is space really out there, or time really out there, wrong question. The claim is, though, that we experience the world spatially and temporally. So what's space? Well, could we imagine empty space free of objects?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you could think of like,
Space.
yeah, space. Yeah, think of vacuum.
room.
Yeah, because you just picture like a sci-fi movie in space, and you kind of pan the camera over so it's not looking at any objects or stars or anything, and it would look, well, just like, you know, it'd just be a blank screen. So that seems to work. Now, he claims that space is not a sensation we have. Rather, it's the form we use of our mind to arrange our sensations. Again, so he claims we don't actually experience space. We experience objects that are spatially structured. So our mind structures our experiences spatially. So kind of weirdly put, in a way, space is in the mind, because it's what we use to organize what we're experiencing. So what about time? Well, time, he claims, is not out there. Time is an illusion, but in a real way. It's how it appears to us, because our mental states of necessity occur in a temporal sequence. Because if there was no temporal sequence, well, we couldn't think. There'd be no, before. Now, one interesting, or many interesting implications of this is that, given his view, there is no such thing as objective real space-time. There's our spatial experiences and our temporal experiences. Now, fortunately, being similar beings, we all have the same or fairly similar spatial temporal concepts. So we process the world the same way. To use an analogy, even though people have, often have very different politics, human politics falls within a fairly narrow band. So you may not agree with someone else, but you can kind of get their view is not infinitely incomprehensible. You're like, that's terrible.
Unless you think about Trump's.
Well, even his views are.
It is incomprehensible.
Well, even his views, you can get them. They're not like, it's not like he's claiming 2 + 7 is
8.
0. So yeah, other people, we may think their views are terrible, but we think we'd never accept those views, but they're kind of within the limits of human comprehension, mostly. Maybe there's stuff that's not. Maybe we can make an argument that some people's views are beyond all human
That's what I'm
conception.
saying.
Yeah, it could be the case. Sorry, poor example. Now, one interesting implication of this is there could be other beings that have radically different, concepts than us. For example, one standard problem in religions that have prophecies and have all-knowing beings, Christianity, is how does God know all that's going to happen? Because one question about the limits of knowledge is, if you know everything, does that mean that you know things that haven't happened yet, or do you just know everything that's already happened? And people debate about that. Does God being all-knowing means that he knows everything that's occurred, but the future is still a potential surprise? Now, there's also, of course, again, a problem of prophecy, because you have the Revelations of St. John, which claims to see the future, and Kant has a way around that, or a way to work with that. Now, St. Augustine, to solve the problem, he put God outside of time, beyond time. And so, God is able to know the future because, for him, past, present, and future are experienced simultaneously for him. Whereas for us, we experience in a sequence. We can't flip ahead. For God, in one way to use a metaphor for God, time is like a book. All the pages are already there.
He can just
Yeah,
visit to see
he
if he
can-
finds out things.
Yeah, you can flip to any page he wants. For us, reality is like a movie playing on, you know, an old-time movie playing on a screen where we can't touch the controls. It just plays. We can't go back or forward, it just goes. And so, it's not that God makes you, it's when you're tying the problem of free will. One question is, well, how can God know the future but still have free will? Because if you have free will, then you can do things that God can't predict. And one way around that is to say, well, yeah, you have total free will. But it doesn't, well, does the fact that I know what you did, you know, say last class, or what score you got on an exam, does that mean you had no free will in taking the exam because I know the score now? No, I know what it is, but I didn't make you do anything. Now, in the case of God, he's not making us do anything. He already knows what you're going to do because from his standpoint, it's already in the book.
It's already done.
Yeah, so it's not that he makes you do it.
You
So
just wrote down what you did.
yeah, he just looks and says, well, that's what they did. So he knows what you did. He knows what you're gonna done. Time is tough.
Yeah, actually it is, don't you?
Time words are tough.
So it's more like destiny then.
Yeah. Yeah, destiny would be that you just, not only is it potentially known, that there's no way to, if it's a destiny that's real destiny, like fate, there's no way to get out of it. That's just gonna happen. There's no escape. And then of course there's debate, like with free will, like if some things are destined, how much is like, is some of it free, some of it not free, and the degrees of freedom.
Well, but everything is like the domino effect. If I come through that door, I'm gonna come into this room. If I come into this room, I have these options. I can go straight down this aisle, I can go across the chairs. So either way, what you do is dependent upon where you start and what direction you choose to go.
Yeah, and the debate over, you know, a free choice would be, do you have all, I mean, you get all these options, is that you're able to pick, you know,
Whatever choice you make,
Yeah.
that's,
or is it that, like dominoes, where it's already, you know, well, there's the view, what's called predetermination, where everything is already set, like a script, and you're forced to play the script. There's also just determinism, where it's not preset, but in effect it is, because everything that happens cannot happen otherwise, can't be any different. And then there's the view, the free will view, where you make choices. Then there's also, of course, the random view, where you don't make choices, but it's all
but
random.
even when you don't make a choice, you made a choice.
True, not,
So-
yeah, not choosing.
So, I mean, it's predetermined because if, in the eyesight of God, it's already been done. We're just doing it, but in his time, in his sight, it's already been done. So,
You're on, you know,
so you making your choice,
Mhm.
like, I chose to buy this,
yeah,
but I didn't have to choose it, but I chose to buy it.
yeah, and that view of time allows you to have God know everything, but still be free, because he's already, you know, for him it's already
It's
happened.
happened,
And for you, it hasn't, so
right,
you don't know what you're gonna do necessarily,
but he does.
but he does, he knows what you done did. What done. You done,
I've already done it.
You got it done.
I was gonna ask, what do you think about like maybe the bad turnouts that happen in people's life? But God already knows those bad turnouts, but it's already known before they do those things. Like maybe this book is like already written.
Yeah, because the one thing with the problem of evil, if God knows it's gonna happen, why does he let it happen? Like, why did 9/11 happen? And then, one standard reply to the problem of evil, the big picture view, is that it all gets fixed later in the book.
It's all for the greater good.
Yeah,
But if he stopped it from doing it, then he'll be stopping your free will. And if God's saying, I'm giving you free will, you know, if I said, you can have this here, if you want it, I can't stop you if you say, oh, thank you, I'm gonna get it. Because I already said, you can have it if you want to. So people like to say, well, why God let this happen and he knew this was gonna happen? Because he told you, it's your choice. You know, you could go to the left, you could go to the right, you could sit down and do nothing. But and whatever you choose to do, he's sitting there and see. You know, and he'll let you see different things, how by knowledge and by those people telling you, if you don't do nothing, you know, you're never gonna accomplish anything. But if I just decide to sit here, nothing will ever come of me. But that was my choice. I decided to sit here and
Yeah, free will is tricky. And of course, you know, the usual response to the free will thing is that God could have us free, but we couldn't actually hurt anybody. It'd be kind of like, you know, you try to stab somebody, you could choose to stab somebody, but it doesn't kill them.
It's like one of those cutscenes in the game, like,
Yeah.
no matter what you do, like, it's the same way.
Yeah, that'd be no free will. And the allowing free will, but without allowing people to hurt other people would be like, you know, would be like making war into paintball. You can shoot all you want, but you can't actually really hurt anybody. So you could have free choice, you just couldn't choose to harm people. And so people have argued, you know, that God could allow us total free choice, but our evil choices couldn't hurt people. So someone could try to like kill someone, but they can never succeed. They still freely get to choose it. Someone could try to assault someone, but they would just, like, their hands would stop, you know, they really want to assault, but God's like,
then they're still blaming God for that. Why don't you just let me do it?
Like, something gets in the way of it, like
Yeah.
another occurrence gets in the way.
yeah, or it could be very subtle, like a person tries to, you know, grab someone, and they slip and they stick their hands on the stove, and they're like, oh, no assaulting to that guy anymore. Or they try to, like, you know, they try to shoot someone, kind of like, have you ever seen Kung Fu Hustle? That's a part of like a hilarious movie, well worth watching. Yeah, well, in my totally bad opinion, this guy's trying to throw a knife, but it ends up like screwing up and like ends up like just sticking himself with it. It's like always, you know, he's like tries it again, like the handle falls off and hurts himself. So he's free to try to hurt people, but you know, if God made that happen, so every time someone tried to hurt someone, they just either wouldn't work or they just hurt themselves. And they get free choice. They can be as evil as they want to be. They just can't bring anyone else into their evil. They just can't hurt people. And which is a good question, because God can make the world, you know, such that you can't hurt other people. Of course, then people would probably stop being evil, but that would be their choice. If evil had no effect.
I have one more question. What about the people who are like maybe having to become victims of like someone making like a decision based off of free will? What do you think about that?
About what?
So what about someone who maybe happen to be a victim based off of the free will decisions of someone?
Well, yeah, that's the problem of evil, because it's one thing people to make is, you know, make
The person
choices.
who was a victim, they didn't have a choice.
Right.
Of free will. 'Cause
Yeah, it's not there. They don't get to. Yeah, the victim doesn't get to choose.
Yeah.
You know, they're just walking down the street and someone
It's disruptive.
says, I'm gonna run in there with, you know, I'm gonna drive my truck up on the, you know, on the sidewalk and kill people. They didn't choose. You know, I guess if two people want to kill each other, like say, hey, let's go out and let's just, you know, do murder suicide on each other, then maybe God would say like, okay, safety's off. You know, you agree. But yeah, in terms of, you know, like it's an excellent point you make. The people who are victims, they don't get that choice. So why should evil people who want to kill people or assault people or rape people, why should their free will override the choices of others? So maybe God can make it so you have to have a vote. Both people have to agree. Like I want to kill you. I don't want to be killed. God's like, no killing. Can't kill him. And if someone says, I want to kill you, I totally want to be killed. And God's like, go. Yeah, I mean, he can make that happen. He's all powerful. If video game designers can do it, God could too. Or maybe there's more mystery to the plan.
I was gonna say, like, why do you think that is in the book that you were saying with God knowing everything?
Well, one way you could argue is that since he knows everything, maybe he knows that everything turns out all right in the end. That all the terrible suffering ends up, you know, that the only way, people often use the metaphor of like forging, you know, an item. You know, imagine what it'd feel like being the sword being forged. You know, you're being burned and scorched and hammered, but in the end, you're this magnificent thing. And maybe that's what happens to us. You know, that we're hammered and burned and you know, tormented, and then in the end, then we're these beautiful, wonderful things. And the only way that can happen is if we go through a whole bunch of crap. And then, of course, the reply to that is, wow, that's total BS. You don't need, you know, that's ridiculous. Yeah, the problem of evil is a pretty serious problem. You know, why is all this bad stuff happening, and how do you reconcile that with there being a good God. And again, the happy ending answer is standard one. At the end of the book, it says, and they all existed happily ever after in heaven for all eternity. Yeah. Maybe that's how it ends, and it was all cool. And maybe God knows that.
Well, you know have you seen Infinity War?
Of course. What, you gotta watch
The
that.
Avengers Infinity War?
Also good.
Nah, I need to see it.
Well, I was gonna give you an example from that,
Okay,
but,
I need to watch it.
Yeah, you need to watch it. Then we can do the examples. Yeah, spoilers.
alright.
Spoiler, Batman dies.
Nice try, Barbara.
I know.
Give me credit though.
That's why it's funny. Now, mathematics also for him works in a similar way. Now, he thinks that the space-time stuff gives him mathematics this aesthetic a priori. How so? Well, this is what he claims. He claims geometry is a science of space. And math, he claims, and this is maybe a big stretch, math involves processing numbers, so math requires time. Again, kind of a stretch. So if math and geometry connect to space and time, and space and time are universal and necessary components of our experience, then he claims you're able to have it be a priori, because they're universal and necessary, but at the same time, they are things that tell us about the world studied by science. So what he thinks he's able to do is kind of do this clever maneuver, that space and time are features of experience. They are a priori because they're baked in, but they're part of our experience, so they tell us about the world. Math and geometry are about space and time, so they're something we know by pure reason, but also they tell us about the world, which is an amazing dance. And then, of course, he still does. So what is packed into our magnificent thinking things? Well, much like our good dead friend Aristotle, he has these categories. Because people like categories. Now, this will be a little epistemology, but he claims knowledge comes from a combination of our senses, what he calls a sensibility, and understanding. And one thing that Kant is known for is he often says like two things are like totally different, but then they're really just the same thing. And so he considers maybe these things, they're not two separate things, they really have like a root to them. So what the senses do, according to Kant, is they give us objects. Standard, our eyes, ears, etc., pull in data. We get an object metaphorically in our mind, hopefully not for real, because I've heard a whole bunch of and then we think about them through our understanding. So what happens is, senses pull in this data, and then our intuitions about space and time process them. So we get spatial and temporal experiences, and then of course what we do is use these categories to organize things even more. I mean, to use the obvious metaphor, although Kant wasn't aware of smartphones, when you take a picture with the camera, it's the photons hitting the CCD or whatever kind of or the film, whatever type of camera you got, and then in the case of a smartphone, you have the software processing all that stuff, organizing it, and then creating that little object in your phone, your memory. Now, if we only had perception, then we wouldn't have any knowledge, because we'd be like a camera. And so what we need is, beyond just the data processing, or just beyond the data coming in, are these categories. So what he claims is basically this. Without the senses, we have nothing to think about. Without thinking, we have no capacity to think. So we gotta have, according to him, both. So what are these concepts? Well, we'll close on these. There are 12 for him a priori concepts, namely quantity, which includes, and this is the reason why there's 12, unity, plurality, totality, There's also quality, which includes reality, negation, limitation, modality, which includes possibility and impossibility, existence, non-existence, necessity, and contingency. So what he thinks we do is basically we pull in sensory stuff, whatever is coming in from the noumena, it hits our senses. We have in our minds all these concepts and structuring and so forth, and then before we realize this is happening, it's all processed, and then we get a object of thought that our understanding works with, and it's already what we experience is pre-organized, pre-packaged, pre-categorized by all this stuff. So if, to use a metaphor, it's like our mind we're like the king or queen of our mind. And we have all of these servants, our categories. When something comes to the door, they go and process it and polish it and do all this to organize it and then bring it to us. And we don't know what came in through the castle gate. We just know what ends up in the throne room for us to, what our servants have brought to us to look upon. And we can never get outside of the castle, so all we know is what's coming through the gates and sitting beside our throne. So that brings us to the end of the stuff for today.